daughter is a Star Wars fan, the first thing they're going to ask for are the figures.
The reason they're 3.75 inches tall is because the first mock-up figures that I made were Fisher-Price Adventure People.
Welcome back to GFT. Here is a new episode with your host Chris B. Thanks for tuning in. This will be fun. Let's discuss figures and the latest toy run from a galaxy far, far away. Let's dive into the news and what's next in your display. From the Black Series to TVC, from Hasbro to the Kenner Legacy. 3.75 inches, 6 inches tall. Galactic Figure Talk covers it all. Displaying, rearranging the collection. Discussing figures, asking Hasbro for perfection. The thrill of the hunt, filling gaps is the mission. Always on the move, always wanting mint condition.
I have 3 of each, 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
We finally launched 6-inch when I felt the time was right.
Alright, so welcome to another episode of GFT Galactic Figure Talk. My name is Chris B, and I'm here to talk about Toy Fair 2025, plus some other Star Wars action figure related news. And then also, I did come across a bunch of interviews that the Hasbro CEO gave over the last few weeks. So I want to play you guys those as well, because he does talk about the tariffs and their general approach to how they are looking at toys. And I thought that was pretty insightful and quite interesting, actually. So let's start off with Toy Fair, though. As expected, there wasn't really a lot of new stuff shown. There was some, but not a whole lot. But it was still a pretty impressive showing in that seeing all the products that they have coming out for the Black Series line and the Vintage Collection, seeing them all displayed nicely together. There are two things that really stood out to me. First of all, I did notice, and I've been saying this on the podcast a couple of times now, but I think the product quality is really high. There's a lot of cool stuff coming from Hasbro, but also just the pure amount of stuff that they have when you look at Black Series and the Vintage Collection combined for Star Wars action figure collectors. There's a lot of stuff coming. Plus, we also have the Retro Collection. So the previously announced A&H figures were on display for the first time at the show, and we got to see what those figures look like. Because going into Toy Fair, we didn't really know whether those figures are going to be sold individually or if they're going to be in a multi-pack again. And it basically confirmed that yes, they are going to be in the multi-pack, in a 6-pack, just like the previous ones that they've done. This one is also a Target exclusive. It already went on pre-order. It has not sold out, so if you still want to pick this one up, you can. It's up on the Target website right now. It costs $60, which I think is a really good price, considering that, I mean, that's $10 for a figure, right? And I think the figures themselves looked really nice. Seeing Han, Stormtrooper, and Luke Yavin, the Rebel Fleet Trooper, the Sand Trooper, the reissue or the remake of Walrus Man or Ponda Baba, and then of course Dr. Evison. I thought they all looked really nice, actually. I saw some comparison to the Stan Solo customs that the guy made over the years, and I felt that maybe some of the customs looked better, but I still really enjoy what Hasbro is doing here, and I'm looking forward to getting those. I'm really happy that they also changed up the Han Solo Stormtrooper photo image on the card, because the Vintage Collection one was it didn't really turn out that great, right? So I'm really grateful that Hasbro remade that image. I think this looks so much better. And I also think that all the images that they've chosen really for the Retro Collection wave here look really nice. The Sand Trooper looks kind of cool. It does have the diamond-shaped knee plate that it's supposed to have. It is a pretty clean looking figure. Sand Troopers kind of need to be dirty, but I mean, this is a Kenner-esque figure, so I don't think that our Kenner figures ever had any weathering on them whatsoever, so I think this is definitely cool looking. The backpack, I think, is permanently attached together with the ammo pouch on the shoulder, and I'm a big fan of those. I hope that they keep going, and I hope that they keep making those figures that Kenner never got to. And from the response that I saw in my community, this is what people were the most excited about. out of all the reveals lately. I mean, I got so many messages about when people could purchase that, and it seemed to really pique the interest of a lot of people who maybe are not that much into the vintage collection or even the Black Series line, right? So I found that to be quite interesting. So anyways, $60, $10 a figure. I think that's a fantastic deal. And if you're looking to expand your existing Kenner collection with some modern takes on the same type of simplicity and the same type of look of what these figures look like, then this might be for you. So if you haven't seen those yet, check out the press images on galacticfigures.com. The link to the press release and the images is in the podcast description. Now, for the vintage collection and for the Black Series, I don't think there was anything new that was revealed at that show. They did have an X-Wing fighter on display, though, from the Epic Heroes line. Kind of looked like a Kenner X-Wing, actually. You know, like all white with some red markings on it. Fairly simple compared with the modern toys that we typically get these days. And, yeah, you know, it's not something that I'll jump out of my seat off, you know. But seeing an X-Wing fighter is always kind of cool, especially when it kind of goes with the 3 3/4 inch figures. So we'll see. I mean, that's definitely going to be out sometime this year, and it looks like Epic Heroes, despite being on clearance at every place, continues at least throughout this year, seems like. But that was it for Toy Fair 2025. It was good to see Hasbro back at the show, and yeah, I kind of have to wonder why they decided to do a live stream 2 or 3 days before Toy Fair. I think that definitely took a lot of thunder away from the show itself. But I guess it was good for us who weren't in attendance, right? But still, I feel like it was a bit of an odd choice to do a live stream and show some of those figures already a few days prior to the big event, basically. But anyways, that's it for Toy Fair 2025. And in other Star Wars action figure news, we now know what the 4th, or basically the 5th exclusive is for Walmart so far in Revenge of the Sith packaging, and that's a 501st Clone Trooper. Walmart Collector Con is taking place over 2 days this year. It's March 13th and March 14th. The figures are going to go up for pre-order at 7 o'clock Pacific time. If you want to get those figures, then yes, you have to get up early and pre-order those. And the figures that they're going to have exclusive to them, again, is Count Dooku, R2-D2, Kit Fisto, and a 501st Clone Trooper, plus the Clone Commander Cody, which is also being released in the same type of Revenge of the Sith packaging. That's already available on the Walmart website. You can already pre-order that. I think that was revealed at New York Comic Con last year already. So if you haven't done so yet, check out walmart.com, look for Cody, and pre-order him if you want him. As for the figures themselves, those are all straight repacks, with the exception of R2-D2, where they loosened the side panels again on the legs, so you can put the rocket booster into the legs. That's a feature that the previous release of this newly sculpted version of the Astromech droid for R2-D2 did not have. So that's the only change, I think, here for those figures. Again, March 13th and 14th, Walmart Collector Con over 2 days, and 2 of the figures are going to be available on the first day, and 2 of the Black Series figures are going to be made available the day after. Now that kind of begs the question, when are we going to see more reveals for Star Wars action figures? And I'm not sure. I mean, maybe we're going to have a few more reveals before Star Wars Celebration, maybe 1 or so, but Star Wars Celebration is not that far away anymore, and I think that they are going to save quite a few reveals for that show. I mean, what better place to reveal Star Wars action figures than an actual Star Wars convention, right? And that's taking place on April 18th through the 20th, I think it is. About, 4, 5, 6 weeks or so to go until a big event. And then, of course, right after Star Wars Celebration comes to a close, we're going to get the first 3 episodes of the Andor TV series from Season 2. So there's going to be a lot of Star Wars content coming at us. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, they did release a 2-minute long special on Disney Plus about the second season of Andor. It does look pretty good, I think, so I'm mildly excited about it. So fingers crossed that that's going to deliver. And quite honestly, I felt like the previews that we got looked more Star Wars than what we got in the entire first season. So yeah, hopefully it's going to be good. Now, as far as toy news goes and Star Wars action figure news goes, there really isn't a whole lot going on since I just talked about Toy Fair stuff and I just did an episode about the live stream that took place. But I did go to my local Walmart this morning to check to see what was new there. Again, there is no vintage collection on the shelves whatsoever. There's a bunch of Black Series figures. My local Walmart store, for example, still has a whole bunch of Lando Calrissians from the Black Series line in his general outfit. I mean, that figure has been around now for several years as well, so Lando just does not do well at retail at all. All the Epic Heroes figures were marked down. The Bo-Katan 2-pack with Moff Gideon in the Dark Trooper armor, I think, was down to $5. And all the Epic Heroes figures were marked down drastically, so they're on deep clearance now. And that was really it, though. There really was not a whole lot of Star Wars stuff on the shelves. For some reason, my local Target store all of a sudden has a whole bunch of holocron Darth Maul figures on the shelves. Full price. I don't know why they all of a sudden showed up. Maybe it was just a delayed shipment or something, or maybe the box had gotten lost in the back room or something. But they're fully stocked with holocron Darth Maul figures now. Nothing else quite worth talking about, really. I mean, there's literally no vintage collection figures at all at that location. Now, when it comes to online, the Black Series Kalnaka figure is about to ship, I think. Amazon has it listed for early April now, I think, but some people, I think, already have received their shipping notifications. So if you pre-ordered the Black Series Kalnaka through Amazon, keep an eye on that. That seems to be about to ship out. Entertainment Earth had gotten in a few cases of the latest vintage collection wave where the Snow Trooper is included, but of course they sold through that. Who knows how many cases they actually ended up getting. But those should also ship from Amazon, hopefully soon. So fingers crossed, I'm excited to get my hands on those figures. And that's currently it when it comes to Star Wars action figure news. Now, I've come across a few interviews which were conducted by Brian Saucy, an executive editor at Yahoo Finance, with Chris Cox, the CEO of Hasbro, where they talked about the toy industry and Hasbro's approach to making toys, and they specifically talk about action figures, and they also talk about the tariffs, which are on everybody's mind currently. So I'm going to play you guys the snippets of those interviews, and yeah, I thought that those were pretty insightful, so check those out.
Like, how does this get made in this era of trade war? Like, how much more will that cost? You know, this cool sword, how much does that cost? Like, and how do you keep this thing a profitable venture for a company like Hasbro?
Well, a tariff is basically a cost on the product, and costs on products will ultimately get passed through to the end user. So, our preference would be that we minimize tariffs wherever possible because we're very focused on affordability and getting the lowest possible price points to our consumers. So something like this action figure will go for around $20, $25.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And so it's usually made in markets like China or Vietnam, increasingly India and Indonesia, where labor costs are lower, where there's a relatively sophisticated supply chain that can take care of like the IP that's associated with it, and can also, most importantly, take care of the safety concerns because these things are ideally oriented towards children.
Do you tell, now we have 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, 10% more on China. Do you tell toy designers, hey, you have to redesign how a product is done to bring down costs? Is it that intricate, I guess?
Well, we'll do a couple things. So we'll work with our suppliers and try to wrest whatever cost savings that we can out of them. We can do that in a couple different ways. We can negotiate with them and try to get costs down as much as we can, but recognizing they operate on very slim margins, like 3 or 4%. We also can do consolidation of the vendors that we work with so we can drive scale, and that lowers the average unit cost of things. We can look at the design of a product and try to cost optimize it, which we've been doing very actively for the last 3 years. And usually when we do that, it's not an approach of shrinkflation. Like, I used to buy a half gallon of ice cream and now I get
but this transformer used to come with 2 arms, now it has one.
So we don't do that. But what we try to do is we try to be clever with how the internals are designed, how the mechanisms are designed so that it's still fun, but maybe we can, trim off a couple things that the user won't notice and get the prices down. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about tariffs in the neighborhood of 20% plus, that's a cost that we can't fully accommodate and will have to be passed on.
And how much does that change the economics of the toy business?
Well, I think it depends on what the elasticity is, and that depends on the category. So, a higher end kind of action figure that appeals to kind of multiple demographics, both kids and adults, that tends to be a more inelastic category. Like you have a little bit more pricing power. For things that are oriented towards like kids and where parents are on a budget, you'll tend to have to really work hard to try to hit magic price points.
Some of the folks I talked to this morning, Chris, saying they've given you high remarks for cutting costs. Like how much in costs have you cut out of this business the past 2 years, and how much more is left?
Gosh, I think we're over $600 million of costs taken out of the business. Probably about 2/3 of that is via our supply chain, and then the balance is from just general overhead and admin savings.
Can you get to, what else do you have to do to get to that 1 billion mark? I think you put that out today as part of your longer term plan.
Yeah, we still have some general admin and overhead that we can save. So that's what we pay for vendors. That's kind of like the overall kind of overhead associated with the company. Supply chain will be a big contributor for us as well. We're doing a lot for design to value to take costs out of our products, but still maintain really good quality. And then there's this whole thing that's called gross to net, which is basically the difference between our gross revenue and our net revenue. And that has to do with how much discounting allowances we put into place and other kind of trade allowances that we put into place, generally to account for overbuilding a product. So the better we get at forecasting and the better we get with supply chain management, the less we'll have to put in there. And, when you look at supply chain, gross to net, and kind of like our general kind of like overall spending, that really kind of forms the lion's share of how we get to $1 billion of cost savings by 2027, which was the revised target we just talked about today.
Chris, I'm inspired by everything in your background. I think those are all toys that I would purchase maybe at some point soon, but I do realize I'm not the norm. Why are toy sales in the US still under pressure? What's going on here?
Well, Brian, I actually would say you're increasingly becoming the norm.
It's because I'm getting old, right?
Yeah. The fastest growing segment in both video games as well as toys are people over the age of 13. The biggest segment now in video games is actually consumers 35 plus. So high-end collectibles, things from your childhood, that's a big, powerful motivator for the toy industry, has been for the last couple of years, and I think will be for several more. Unfortunately, Hasbro has its better than its fair share of volume from that. 60% of our sales are from 13 plus. Now, there is a little bit of pressure in some other areas of the toy category. A lot of that just has to do with the toy volumes normalizing after the pandemic. The toy category has been down kind of like low single digits per year for the last 3 years. We see that starting to flatten out and basically being flat for the next 2 to 3 years. We think Hasbro will benefit. We've got a great innovation portfolio coming out. We have strength in that quote unquote kidult segment. And we have a very diversified business. It's not just toys, it's also licensing, which is a business that's up 60% for us over the last 2 years, as well as games with some huge franchises like Monopoly and Magic the Gathering.
Chris, how much of a headache are tariffs to a business like Hasbro?
Well, it's certainly one that we'd like to minimize. The toy industry in general thrives on sub $10 and sub $20 price points. A company like Hasbro has been working very hard to take costs out of our mix and push more value into the channel. And like when you think about the typical American family, probably 95% of American families have a Hasbro product inside of their toy chest or inside of their game chest at the home. Our hope is that we're able to get through this phase of tariff negotiations, find a good conclusion that allows us to keep prices low and bring smiles to kids' faces at price points that are as low as possible.
Is the reality, though, Chris, that this coming holiday season will simply be more expensive?
I think a lot depends on how the whole tariff scenario plays out. When we look at like the current kind of like guidance that we've given, which factors in the 10% on Chinese tariffs, pricing will be a variable that we play with, but I think it will be very targeted. So, in general, our focus is to bring more value and more products at sub $10 and sub $20.
Can you manufacture toys profitably in the United States?
We do. So a lot of our Magic the Gathering business, which is by far our biggest brand, it's over $1 billion and drives a heck of a lot of our bottom line health. It's made in North Carolina and Texas. We manufacture board games in Massachusetts. So certainly we can do it. I think the challenge with manufacturing a lot of toys like action figures and kind of like higher turnover toys is it tends to be, those toys tend to be very manual to create. And they also tend to have a fair amount of turnover because like about 50, 60% of SKUs in the toy industry change each year. It's a fast fashion category. So I think bringing back manufacturing jobs to the US would require us to do very heavy automation, and it would be a pretty heavy lift and take multiple years.
Fair point. Lastly, Chris, too, it's not lost to me that you have another partnership with rival Mattel. I remember you announced something similar with some other brands more than a year ago. Is the reality that given the cost environment, tariffs, cost of labor, you name it, that your two companies are going to have to work together?
Well, I think the reality for Hasbro is we already work with Mattel, we already work with Lego, we work with Spin Master, we work with all of the major toy manufacturers. And I think that's an advantage we have. We see partnerships as an opportunity to extend our brands, to bring more value to new consumers, and to make some money in the process. As I said, our licensing business is up 60%, and that's a very high margin business for us. So I see that as a power trend moving forward and something that's just net goodness, whether it's Play-Doh plus Barbie, like we just announced today, Transformers and Hot Wheels, D&D plus Lego, or supersized board games like we do with Spin Master.
No chance in hell I'll be able to make one of those Play-Doh Barbies. I'm just going to say it there. I wanted to get that out publicly. Chris, looking forward to seeing you around the Toy Fair. Chris Cox, Hasbro CEO. Good to see you.
Thanks so much.
So there you have it. I thought there were some interesting snippets in there, especially when it comes to the cost cutting, when it comes to the products, and hoping that people won't notice. But, the lack of paint operations on the figures these days is absolutely noticeable. The lack of inclusion of ropes and stuff like that or additional accessories is also noticeable. Not on all the releases, thank God, but when it comes to Jedi and such, it is noticeable. So I'm looking back now at last year, I was really happy to see that Black Series, for example, got Acolyte Jedi figures where every single Jedi had their robes included. I thought that was really important. But then you have other figures like Balin Skull or Shin Hati that don't come with them. The upcoming Kit Fisto figure, for example, will again not have the robe included. So yeah, it is noticeable, especially the Ahsoka figures that they've done. I mean, that's a main character that has its own TV show. And their regular releases for this figure does not come with the ropes, But it all goes back to upper management, as you've heard, and, the people working on the brand itself. I guess they have to work with what they got. Anyways, interesting interviews there on Yahoo Finance. I'm going to put the link in the podcast description if you want to check those out. And I'm always up for discussing that kind of stuff with you guys in the Galactic Figures Facebook group. The link to that is also in the podcast description. So this is where I'm going to wrap up this episode of GFT. I'm going to be back with another episode of the podcast once there's some stuff to talk about. Maybe once some new figures show up here in the studio, there's something I can talk about. Oh, there's actually one figure that I was just finished photographing, and that's the IG-12 figure that comes with Grogu and the Unselin from the Vintage Collection, which comes at a deluxe price at $25. Really good set overall, except for the price. I think this should have really been on a regular card. The IG-12 figure is nicely detailed. It looks really nice, but again, when it comes to paint and metallic looking parts or weathering on those figures. There's absolutely nothing here on this droid. But it is a very cool looking figure, especially with Grogu sitting on the inside of the chest. So yeah, I mean, in that regards, a very cool character, fun in the show as well. So I'm glad that they made it. Just really not looking forward to paying $25 plus tax, almost $30 for this one 3¾ inch action figure. And still not getting a better paint application out of it than on a regular release. So look for that to be added to the database on galacticfigures.com in the coming days. So thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Please hit the subscribe button. Hit the 5-star review in your podcast app, please, if you have a second. And I'll catch you on the next one.
This is it for this episode of G.